Let's start with, I think, still the favorite in this division, even though things have changed and the landscape has kind of shifted a little bit. And that is the Buffalo Bills. Get into our 2023 preview for the Buffalo Bills. A year ago, around this time, it felt like they were the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl. I mean, this was the team. And it almost felt like that way after week one. You watched them play against the Rams and thought, man, they are just absolutely loaded.
Yeah.
And then they endured just a truly exhausting season. You try to list off everything that happened with the Bills last year. The incident with Damar Hamlin when they played against the Bengals. The snowstorms that just crushed Buffalo, and they had to dig themselves out. They were all snowed in. They had to play the game in Detroit. Micah Hyde is kind of an emotional center of this team, hurts his neck in the second game of the season. They endured so many injuries on defense. Von Miller tears his ACL. Jordan Poyer was hurt for a chunk of the year. Their superstar quarterback tears his UCL and has to play that way for like 5 or 6 games.
Which is pretty important because that's a throwing muscle. They're throwing
when I was doing this last night, I forgot. I just forgot that one of the best players in the league tore a ligament in his throwing arm and it affected him for like a third of the entire season. And by the end of the year, it just felt like they were out of gas.
Yeah.
Emotionally drained, injured. And you could tell from their performance, like they were just kind of over it. Like think about Stephon Diggs in that moment and then everything that happened after with him this offseason. But here's the thing. The people that love this team before last season, the people that made this team what they are, those guys didn't go away.
Right.
And I was talking to Barnwell about this a couple weeks ago when we were doing the swing player show that we did. And I wanted to do the Is This Anything siren about a take that I think I want to try on. I think you can make an argument that this roster could be better than the one in 2019 or in 2021 when we thought that they were the best team in the league. That team had 34-year-old Emmanuel Sanders, 32-year-old Cole Beasley. Spencer Brown was a rookie starting at right tackle. Ike Butker and Cody Ford played 1,100 snaps. And now you have all of the key pieces back with a lot of those younger pieces being older, some reinforcements in certain areas. Call me crazy, but I think this team has a chance to be like really, really good this season, despite some of the questions and despite the schedule.
As Robin Williams said at the end of Good Will Hunting, son of a bitch, stole my line. That's kind of how I look at this Bills team. And spoilers, I've had some pretty high views of this team right now, and pretty like even starting in free agency was like, hey, I see where this arrow is going, where this team, the path that this team might be going down. And I think further moves that they made it through the draft, even small pickups that they made going into the summer. I'm with you. I think this roster is deeper on both sides of the ball. I think I think they've learned lessons that I think could be a really beneficial and pay dividends down the road. Sometimes, keeping up with like me, some reason I'm thinking Good Will Hunting, which made me think of Rounders, which makes me think of Matt Damon. It's just like, but sometimes he talks about, you remember all the hands that you lose as opposed to the hands that you win. That's just a poker and gambling in general. Boy, don't I know. And I think that's it. I think from those losses that they had, and maybe just a tail end of last season, but then the loss before that to the Chiefs, the 2021 season, those stick with you. And I think they're slowly have learned their lessons. All the head coach is still there. The quarterback is still there. Stephon Diggs is still there. Plenty of defensive pieces are still there. Like a lot of them. Yeah, I feel pretty damn good about this team. And I don't want to get ahead of myself for our predictions and award show in a few weeks, but overall, I'm very optimistic about this team. And I like what they've done this offseason to add to a lot of the fun things that they've had before.
I'm sure we'll address all of that as we dig into the unit. So let's start with the offense. The biggest question that you have about the Buffalo Bills offense heading into the 2023 season.
How are they going to find this balance of what I think is the evolution of this offense? I think they're trying to add prongs to their attack. They're trying to add just ways that they can pivot when they need to, especially when the weather gets cold. Hopefully they don't face 20 snowstorms again like they did last year. But when the weather gets cold or defenses are playing a certain way, I just want to see what is it? What are they adding? I have ideas of it. The draft picks with Dalton Kincaid is one of them, but also just their second round pick of Science Torrance. The Connor. Oh my God, which Connor is it? Connor McGovern from the Cowboys.
I can't even describe to you how awful it's been over the last, because I've been at
Connor
these
Williams
places
every time.
So I was at the Jets one day, and then the next day I was in Buffalo. And so I'm trying to keep the Connors straight as I'm on like the Jets radio show. It's impossible.
No.
I just can't do it. I just don't even want to try anymore. They have a Connor at left guard.
They have a Connor.
The Jets
They
have a Connor at center. That's all I got for you.
A former Connor from a former Connor from the Cowboys, which doesn't even narrow it down that much.
Because there's Connor Williams in Miami, who's the starting center. It is a disaster. I can't even describe it to you.
I know, but he's I think he lifts the bar. Even if he's not a high end player, he's above average. He's a fine starter. They needed that so bad.
What they had last year with Saffold and hit the improvement over Saffold at that spot. I know that no one's getting super excited about Connor McGovern. Go back and watch some of the snaps that Roger Saffold was giving them in the second half of last season. It was rough.
He felt bad. It's like he couldn't get out.
He was at the end, man.
Right.
He was at the end. He was a phenomenal player for a long time. But he was at the end. That happens to guys.
It does, and I get why they signed him, because they're like, we need a warm body and
physicality too. I think they wanted to kind of add that element to the offense.
And that was the first kind of inkling, like, hey, we know we have to add this, and this being, I think, some more haymakers, so more straight punches to the face of the defense, I should say. I think they faced their limitations in 2021. I've referred to this a few times, and I will on this show, talking about a different team, of how they realized a limitation of what they were doing. The RPO game, that was a little too finessey. And I think last year they realized that. They still had some RPOs, but then they were trying to find their off-speed pitches. What else can we get to? They use more jumbo personnel with the 6 offensive linemen. They like quadrupled their usage in that. They were using Reggie Gilliam in different ways to use him as a tight end. They're going under center and using play action. They're trying to, and I think that was a catalyst for all these moves that they made in the offseason. Dalton Kincaid, Osiris Torrance, one of the Connors. Also just the running backs they signed, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, even if he's a role player. That all signaled to me that they're trying to find this new way to shift their attack when they need to, because don't get me wrong, they still have a 103-mile-an-hour fastball named Josh Allen. And I think what they're trying to do is, let's have an answer that's not Josh Allen go do something funny and make a play. But I like it. I see the vision, and I think they have the means to do it, because some of the stuff they've already shown in preseason and last year when they were kind of sprinkling this in, it looked sound, it looked good, and there's more to dive into. But overall theme, I like this kind of way of finding the change up, the curveball, the screwball, the knuckleball, whatever you want to call it, their way of doing it.
When I first saw them make those moves, getting the guards, and you look at Ryan Bates, who was their starting right guard last year, who's still on the roster, and Osiris Torrance. Ryan Bates is 305. Osiris Torrance is 330. So the moves that they made, and then the 12 personnel were 11 and a half, as they're calling it, with Dalton Kincaid, which we can discuss. In my mind, the first place it goes is physicality. We're going to run the ball a little more. We want to be downhill. But talking to people there this week, it was almost with the division and some of the pass rushers in mind, even more than the run game, because they're playing against Quinnen Williams, Christian Wilkins, Jalen Phillips as an interior pass rusher, all the guys that the Patriots have. So the integrity of the interior of the pocket was as much of a priority as the running game was. And that makes sense to me.
Yes.
Because when you go back and watch them last season, he was so quick to pull the ripcord so often. Josh Allen, I'm talking about. They would get that very quick interior pressure, and it would just short circuit the timing of their passing game. And because he's Josh Allen, it often worked out well. But that's not how you want to live.
Nope.
So more than even the physicality that it could potentially add, when I look at this set of moves in totality, to me it says we just want to slow our heartbeat down a little bit.
Yeah.
We just want to feel more consistent and settled offensively. This team was second in the NFL in virtually every single offensive metric last year, but it felt so chaotic, their path to get there. So just having it be a little bit quieter, a little bit calmer, having an middle of the field receiving option in Kincaid, be able to run the ball a little bit more consistently. I think that the entire set of moves that they made is just a deep breath that they want to take on this side of the ball. That's what it feels like to me.
That's exactly right. The inside pressure stuff really reared its ugly head in the playoffs. And it was, I mean, especially the Dolphins game when Josh Allen just couldn't get out of his own way and he's getting tricked and he reverted to all of his bad habits. I usually talk about this with QB mechanics and why I kind of roll my eyes sometimes when they're like, oh, Tim Tebow changes motion for the 15th time. And then as soon as the bullets start flying, then the motion goes right back to the long elongated motion. Same with the eyes. Same when the things are live, and same with the pass rushers are coming at you, their ears pinned back, and the guy's right in your face. Guys, even when that doesn't happen, it's still that seeing ghosts or feeling ghosts kind of feeling, where it's like, well, okay, I'm not going to peek at my right guard, but the last 3 times we did this, he gave up a pressure right away. And then that one time he doesn't, then Josh Allen's eyes are going left to right, left to right, left to right. And like you said, it turns into chaos ball, which can be a huge, huge positive because Josh Allen, don't forget it, is rated second in basically every quarterback metric, and he's the most devastating scrambler in the league. I mean, him, Lamar, and like Jalen Hurts and Daniel Jones. Like it's like that's the list. Oh, and Justin Fields. So yeah, throw him in now. But second in QBR, second in success rate with or without scrambles, even balls that he threw. He was second in success rate by pass attempt. EPA per dropback, second. So he's a weapon. And I think some of the shine has gone off him because, he was the next guy up. And I think there was a lot of hyperbole last year. Hyperbole. I'm sorry. Jesus. And when he had the UCL injury, he still was good. That's what's so crazy. He had the injury. Yeah, they tailed off a little bit, but he still was good. He still was a fantastic elite quarterback. So I love that. And like calming your heartbeat's a great way to put it because that's exactly what it feels like. Their ceiling is as high as anybody's. It's way up there. It's up there with the Chiefs, which is just rare in elite territory, elite for any era of NFL football. So lifting that floor, that consistency from down to down, from series to series, that's what this all feels like. And I love it. I love that they're not chasing the dragon of like, we got to beat the Chiefs even more. It's like, no, let's just lift it up so we have maybe a little fewer of these blemishes, like the Dolphins game at Miami early in the season, where they have other things to lean on.
People can't see what you just did, but you just made like a little roller coaster motion with your hand. And that's what it felt like at times. It just felt like it was a little bit up and down. This stat is one I thought was particularly telling. And this is the last thing I'll say about this. On non-play action throws last year, the Bills had the third longest average time to throw in the NFL. The only teams that were higher were the Browns and the Bears. Justin Fields and Deshaun Watson got sacked at a rate twice as high as Josh Allen. That's why their numbers were so high. So that number for the Bills, that's bad. That just shows you how chaotic the offense could be at times. That's not what you want. You want to play more on time, more in rhythm. And I think a lot of these moves were made with that in mind, including going out and getting Dalton Kincaid in the draft. So this team just needed another pass catcher, period. Even if you kind of take Gabe Davis's non-breakout out of the equation, Cole Beasley got 30 snaps for this offense in the divisional round last year. 30.
Third down plays targeted for him in the playoffs. It was insane.
Even with Gabe Davis on the field, and even with Gabe Davis not coming along as quickly as you wanted to, they needed something. And I think they bucketed all the players in this draft, and they said, who's the best pass catcher? And Dalton Kincaid was the answer. So now the question is, what is it going to look like? This team finished dead last in the NFL in 12 personnel usage last season. It was like 4% of their snaps. Now it feels like 12 personnel is going to be their dominant personnel grouping. There's only been one team since 2002 who played more than half of its snaps in 12 personnel. That was the 2021 Dolphins, with Mike Gesicki kind of playing this nebulous role. We don't see teams do this very often. So I'm asking you, is this a good idea? Like, is this going to work? Because it sounds awesome, but in practice, does it actually create the advantages they think that it's creating?
There's some advantages, and Kincaid is a plus receiver, but this is the first preseason game showed a little snapshot of why this could go badly. Their first 3 plays of preseason, all 12 personnel. They were in the red zone. I think it was after the Anthony Richardson interception, I believe. All 3 plays, 12 personnel, hip formation, which is the 2 tight ends next to each other. And they had Dalton Kincaid as the Y, as the inline tight end. He got his ass kicked on all 3 plays. What the problem is there is they want Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox on the field at the same time. And Dawson Knox hasn't really been that guy in his career. He's been the guy that they, on RPOs, this is what's nice about RPOs, is you can have the tight end not block. He can run a route. They take a guy out with them. It's a 1-for-1. That's the way you kind of mitigate maybe a non-blocking tight end. But they plan on having both of them on the field. And if that's their first formation they want to get to, which is something they've run before in the past, and it was actually a really good play action formation for them last year, kind of had me a little worried that Kwity Paye, I believe it was just tossing Dalton Kincaid out the club. And he's going to have to do that. He fights and he's got good technique, but that was my hesitation with him because he is a pass catcher. Really,
he's like 240. I mean, he's just not a big man.
Listed 240, and he's a plus athlete. He's a plus receiver. He's got great catching skills, but it really is like 11.5 personnel. The defenses are going to run out nickel and dime against them. They're not going to switch into base, which is where you get the advantages usually with 12 personnel. You're dictating what the defense trots out, and you do the opposite.
Well,
So
now, can you grind them down? If they're going to play like that, can he be a blocking advantage on a nickel? I guess is going to be the question. Hopefully the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
But then when the nickel's on him in passing situations, is that actually a matchup advantage?
Yeah.
Maybe with some size concerns, maybe that's one element where you can say that it is. And the other thing that when they went out and got Kincaid and then James Cook's role within this offense, this team knows it needs more yards after catch production.
Yes.
They've been chasing it for the last 2 years. Yeah. So last season, 37.7% of Josh Allen's yards came after the catch. That was dead last in the NFL. No other team in the league was below 40%. So if you can have Kincaid create something after the catch as an underneath option, you can have James Cook do some of that. Can, again, the offense just be a little bit easier, a little bit calmer, even though he's not necessarily the most dynamic receiving threat when it comes to down the field stuff.
It's better than what they had. It's a huge improvement over what they had. That's the long and the short of it.
Even if it's uneven in some of these situations, and maybe it doesn't all click into place, it's better than
pass
what they
first
had.
team. They're a pass first team. That's why I'm getting all excited about all these changeups they're throwing. That, don't get me wrong, they're going to use Josh Allen and chuck it and spread it out and chuck it like they should. He's a weapon. He's one of the biggest weapons, best weapons in the league. So you're going to use that. You don't want to take away too many touches from him. It's just a way to have different avenues they can go down. But I'm glad he brought up the James Cook stuff, because Josh Allen becoming more patient, he checked the ball down way a much higher rate, much more efficient rate than he ever has. But those were going to Devin Singletary. And my nickname for Devin Singletary is Slow-Mo. So that kind of is all you need to know. The difference between James Cook, who's got very real juice. I maybe some of the running vision is just okay, but he has juice, and he's got good hands, and he's a good route runner. That's just a plus right there. Even if all the other guys can take care of the running the ball and make up for Devin Singletary going, trust me, that's where James Cook is really coming to play. Just check downs, not even design passes for him. Just check downs where what used to be 5 yards is now 9 yards. That's
runs. Hopefully those becoming 8-yard gains turning into 15-yard gains. Can you get a doubles and home run hitter? Because he has the highest breakaway percentage in the NFL, PFF breakaway percentage among all running backs. If you click down like the qualifying numbers. So they have just a little bit more juice on offense with him, and hopefully with Kincaid. A couple other just receiving notes. Deontay Hardy is there now. He's kind of a gadget slot guy who I think is almost, he's giving you what Isaiah McKenzie was supposed to give you last year, but we're not as concerned about it, which is it's a good thing. Like you're paying
he's actually
him as a
formulated thought.
Yes. So that's a good thing. Trent Sherfield comes in as like their main backup on the outside. So I think that pushes Khalil Shakir down. He's a solid player. Another thing to remember last year about Gabe Davis maybe not breaking out the way that we thought. He had a high ankle that he was really hampered him during last season. So just one more thing to take into account. Last thing about the offense.
I'm sorry, real quick with Gabe Davis. And they kind of try to like up what he did. And then they realize, some certain routes, he's a little better. He's like MVS a little bit, where it's like vertical, keep him vertical. Don't ask him to do the nuanced stuff. And that's knowing his role and limiting his role, I think will pay dividends for him as well. Sorry to cut you off.
No worries. All right, let's get into the defense. Biggest question about the Buffalo Bills defense heading into 2023. What do you got?
I mean, how much Sean McDermott's going to change? Like, how much is he going to really put his fingerprints on this defense? I really looking at the numbers was really interesting. There's certain things you can assume with this defense is they're going to be in a lot of nickel. They're going to run just a certain types of coverages, a lot of quarters, cover 3, all those types of things. What I was actually very surprised at, looking at what they did last year compared to the previous 2 seasons, and this might have been some of the injuries that they faced, so bear with me here, but they blitzed at a way lower rate last year, which surprised me, because I just remember the Chiefs game early in the season. And so maybe anecdotally, and then you look at the numbers like, wow, it dropped 10% compared to 2020.
They were middle of the pack in 2021. They were 30th in blitz rate on third down last season. It was a significant drop.
Yeah, that really surprised me. And this was you don't want to take too much away from the first preseason game, but you can maybe see some, what these teams are thinking about, and especially when they're playing starters, and they're playing a decent amount of starters in that first preseason game, they're cranking up that blitz style again. Even the first play of the game, I think against the Colts, they brought a blitz. So I think it's still going to be the quarters, the cover 3, a little bit more blitzing. They cranked up cover 2 last year, and I think maybe again that might have been some of the DB injuries. That's a way to help that out. So
it's a great point.
I just want to see
what a passivity that comes with that I think seeped into things a little bit for them.
Yeah,
less blitzing,
they're kind of
less
ass kicking, smart quarters defense. That's how I picture him in my head.
Exactly.
Not a passive, oh yeah, catch it and there's an 8-yard gain. Sorry. Like, yeah, it was just a
The
little
cover
different
2 and the
mindset.
cover 6 and the lack of blitzing, it almost felt like that passivity creeps in a little bit. And it
Yeah.
was funny talking to people there. I was talking to Jordan Poyer and Mike Hyde about this. Just, all right, well, with Sean there, what kind of changes have you seen? And they're like, same playbook. Listen, we're going off the same stuff. Nothing is substantially changing. And someone else I was discussing this with, the same kind of idea. They're like, you can have the same plays and have somebody call it differently because they're expressing their personality in a different way. And Sean McDermott's personality is very different than
very aggressive.
Leslie Frazier's personality. He is an aggressive, aggressive man. So that kind of stuff where even if it's the same menu, he's picking different stuff off of it. So I expect more pressure. I expect more aggressiveness. I expect less of some of that passivity that we're talking about. And I don't know how much they're going to need to blitz because I think their front, when everyone's healthy, is going to be pretty good. I said this on the defensive show that we did, the top 10. With Von Miller on the field last year, they would have been 3rd in pressure rate over the course of the season. Overall, they finished 14th. And one of the other issues, independent of him getting hurt, this is another one of those little things that I didn't really notice in the moment, but was brought up when I was talking to somebody. Greg Rousseau had a high ankle sprain right before Von Miller went out for the season. So Rousseau's pressure rate went down intensely after Miller got hurt. And in my mind, it was, oh, well, now lack of attention for Von Miller is he just doesn't impact the game the same way. But it directly aligned with when he had that high ankle. The first 7 weeks of the season, here are the players with a better pass rush productivity from PFF than Greg Rousseau. Nick Bosa, Zadarius Smith, Rashawn Gary, Von Miller, Micah Parsons, and Myles Garrett. That was it. So you take that high ankle sprain out of the equation, and is he that guy over the course of the entire season? They also have Leonard Floyd there now.
Yes.
So the question is, when does Von come back? I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up on the PUP list and missed the first 6 games of the year because this team, come hell or high water, they're going to have a pass rush by the end of the season one of these years. One of these years, they're going to get to the finish line with the right amount of dudes to affect the quarterback in January. So I think taking him along slowly might be the right move because I do think this group overall has enough and is deep enough where they can survive for the first third of the season if Rousseau is healthy and the guy we saw last year.
It's kind of back to the discussion from maybe 2 years ago where we loved how much depth they had. And then we're like, well, we kind of want that ace, but it's still a good thing that they have. They're 6 deep, 8 deep, and I like the Rousseau shout out and just other guys stepping up. Ed Oliver, I'll talk about him in a sec, but
another high ankle sprain, by the way, last year.
Man,
they had 3 guys. Rousseau, Davis, and Oliver dealt with them for a good chunk of the season.
This also is why what Mahomes did in the playoffs is so impressive because
ridiculous.
A high ankle sprain is a legit 6-week injury that you feel better after 2 weeks. Like you feel, oh, that feels normal, and you have no pop off that leg. I've had it. I know tons of people that had it. Rodney Hudson's the one I always remember because he was like, after a week, Rodney's so tough. He was like, I'm good. And then you see him dragging. He's not a great athlete anyway, so it really didn't help out. But no, I'd prefer if they kind of brought Von along slowly just because of what you said that's the thing. They always lose reinforcements. They don't have reinforcements for the second half of the year. Let's kind of flip the script a little bit. Let's kind of hold on, build this depth, let everybody get this run, make it easier. I think I talked about this in the top 10 defense show. Let them get the reps, get used to not having that true ace because Von Miller is that true ace still. So, and then get him on the second half of the year. They also brought in like Poona Ford.
Poona Ford's on this team now. Jordan Phillips is back. They've got a lot of bodies on the interior of the defensive line along with the edge.
They had the most run stuffs in TFLs, the highest rate of run stuffs in TFLs in the NFL last year. I didn't know that with the Bills. I just didn't like. There's so much when you take a step away and you rewatch it and you're like, oh yeah, they do some different things that I remember them being. I remember them just like getting gashed and not making big plays and affecting the ball. And it's like, no, they actually did some things. So we'll just see how it goes. Getting
back into the point about this roster maybe being deeper than others we've seen. Taylor Rapp is here now as a safety depth. When they brought him in, when looking at the moves that they made in the offseason, in my mind, it's like, okay, are they going to use more 3 safety stuff than they would have before? But I think they were looking at him in case Poyer left. And then when the safety market settled, they realized we could get both of them. So now they have both of them. So this was a potential starter for them that is now a backup because they got Poyer back at a reasonable price. And so they have the safety depth they haven't had in years past. And I think the same is true at corner. Khair Elam, who they traded up for in the first round last season, in a perfect world, he just takes that job and runs with it opposite Trey White, who's going to be healthy for the whole year. That hasn't happened. And so that's a little bit frustrating. But at the same time, Now you have a bunch of guys who played him,
Yes.
Dane Jackson, Christian Benford, so they can even deal with some attrition at that spot.
Yeah.
So everywhere along the defense, they can endure an injury essentially and still have starting caliber players. There's so few defenses that can say that.
They've inadvertently created great depth. Like
Yes.
it's like they just did it, like fell into it. It's great. I mean, but Elam like has been so up and down throughout his career, and I still
It was
like
a
him.
big
It's just
transition for him because he played in a real press heavy system at Florida. They don't do as much of that here. So he's had to see the game a little bit differently. He hasn't practiced great, but he played okay in the games. So I think even if they're a little bit frustrated with his lack of kind of development during training camp this year, when they've thrown him into the fire, he's been playable. So that's encouraging, even if he's not going to be the day one starter this season.
But I was going to say, it's like, even like Dane Jackson, who has kind of been beating him out, has been it's not like it's like, oh man, it's best of a bad bunch. It's like, no, he's actually been like a fine, solid player. Like he stands out to me when you watch him on film, even when you're not expecting him to. Like all of a sudden, just this guy pops up like number 30, and you're like, who's number 30 again? Like that's how I feel all the time. And I'm like, oh yeah, Dane Jackson. I remember that name, but it's a good thing. It's like they're creating this depth, and just again, going back to like what I brought up about the cover 2, having Trey White back is just so huge. Like just actually hitting the ground running with him. He's a good corner, and it lets them get into that quarters and cover 3 world where he's watching down on the side and they can flood the other zone. So just going to pay dividends. And Rapp they're working as the backup nickel, backup slot player.
They have that if they want to. And
again,
John Johnson's a great nickel, but flexibility and depth. Another point about the 2021 version versus this version, Trey White was hurt for those playoffs. Now he's back. So that was when he tore his ACL. So just one more point. The biggest question personnel-wise about this defense, middle linebacker. Tremaine Edmonds leaves in free agency. So Terrell Bernard, who they drafted in the 3rd round last year, he's been dinged up a little bit. So that is unsettled. They don't know, I think, at this current moment who they want to be the starter there, and that's something to watch. But the good news is they have so many veterans and so many smart veterans at other areas of the spine of the defense. Johnson, Hyde, Poyer that have been here forever, Matt Milano. It feels like they can lift whoever ends up in that spot. I feel very good about that.
It's one question mark along the spine as opposed to some teams having 4, like
Eagles.
Eagles. I know 5, but it does make you feel a little better.
X factor for the Buffalo Bills. So you got
the offensive line. I mean, just how they come along, what I think this unit's going to improve. Again, this offense was an elite offense for a large chunk of last year with this offensive line just built like Swiss cheese. So I think there's going to be improvement, just the baseline of this offensive line. And so I just want to see how much it improves, how much, what they lean into, what they change. I think it's going to be interesting, but they're a huge X factor.
I have Spencer Brown, their right tackle. He's been really up and down in his career. He had back surgery last off season. A year removed from that, can he be a little bit better? Tackle depth is a question for this team now, which is when I know it seems silly, but when you're trying to win a Super Bowl, you think about this stuff. They had Brandon Shell as their swing tackle. He's had 70 starts in his career. He retired last weekend. It's so funny when you go to these teams at this time of the year, how big of a deal that is to the people like building the roster. They're like losing sleep over the swing tackle retiring, and people on the outside never.
Pro scouts look like they haven't slept in a week.
So that's one place where could they maybe make a move before the season actually starts. Not a lot of spare tackles lying around in the NFL these days, but just one thing to keep in mind. Breakout candidate for the Buffalo Bills. So you got.
I went, even though he's a name, I went to Ed Oliver. And he already got paid. He was a 1st-round pick. He was a 5-star recruit. It's not like a new name for anybody, but I just think he's gotten, even by me a little bit, has gotten blasted maybe a little bit unfairly. Just looking at underlying numbers with him, last year he was 2nd among defensive linemen in TFL and run stuff rate, which is crazy disruption. That's what he's built on. And I think maybe those sack numbers haven't been hitting there that we want and what maybe expected, especially a defensive tackle is going to be a top 10 pick. But his QB hits per pass rush last year was the same as Javon Hargrave and Daron Payne. He had 29 knockdowns over the past 2 seasons. And I think it was Barnwell. I Googled it real quick. 45% generally of a QB knockdowns turn into sacks. So he's had 6.5 sacks on 29 knockdowns. So he's gotten a little unlucky, maybe.
So maybe that corrects a little bit. Yeah.
Corrects a little regression to the mean. He's a gap shooter. He can be taken advantage of with some trap stuff, with smart teams and everything. But I want to see him really break out this year. And I think he'll get some regression with the sack numbers that he'll get a boost in people's eyes. He's a good player that maybe I've dinged a little unfairly, maybe in the past.
Give me Kincaid. I'm intrigued by his skill set, and we'll see what happens. I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities within that offense.
Fun player.
What does success look like for the 2023 Bills?
Winning the Super Bowl. Or just making the Super Bowl, I should say. But I said even slaying the Burrow Mahomes dragon and finally making to the big game. That's kind of where I'm going at. If you want my one liner with this, they were 13-3 last year. Their expected win loss was 12-4, and that's facing huge injury luck or bad injury luck on the defense, and they had the worst fumble luck in the NFL last year about recovering fumbles on the ground. And they faced an above average schedule, and they finished with the best overall DVOA and top 4 units on both sides of the ball. And they did it with all that bad luck, like I said. And they have Josh Allen, who's only 27 years old. So Super Bowl. That's my goal for this team, or I think success for this team.
I said go into the Super Bowl. That's what I said as well. The schedule's brutal. We can talk about that as we get a little bit closer to the season, but that should be the expectation for that team.
Yep.